Imagine stepping into the glittering halls of Britain's royal palaces and discovering treasures no one has worn in decades. Hidden away in velvet-lined boxes and secret vaults lie jewels that once dazzled kings, queens, and aristocrats, now gathering dust. Some were gifts from foreign monarchs, others heirlooms steeped in scandal or heartbreak, yet all remain stunningly intact. These are Britain's forgotten royal jewels, silent witnesses to history, still shimmering, yet almost invisible to the world. Chequers ring. The Chequers ring stands as one of the most evocative and intimate survivals of Tudor jewelry, closely associated with Queen Elizabeth I during the later decades of her reign. Dating from around the 1570s, the ring reflects not only the craftsmanship of the Elizabethan court, but also the deeply personal symbolism that often lay hidden within royal adornment. Unlike grand crowns or ceremonial jewels designed for public display, this ring was a private object, small in scale, yet immense in emotional and historical significance. Crafted in gold and mother-of-pearl, the ring's exterior is richly decorated with rubies and tiny diamonds arranged to form Elizabeth I's monogram. Such jewel-encrusted initials were fashionable in the late Tudor period, serving both as personal identifiers and as subtle assertions of royal authority. The use of mother-of-pearl was especially meaningful, as its luminous surface evoked purity and constancy, qualities Elizabeth carefully cultivated as part of her image as the Virgin Queen. What elevates the Chequers ring beyond mere ornament is its hidden locket compartment, concealed beneath a hinged bezel. Inside are two miniature painted portraits, executed with remarkable delicacy. Traditionally, these portraits have been identified as Queen Elizabeth I and her mother, Anne Boleyn. If this interpretation is correct, the ring takes on extraordinary emotional weight. Anne Boleyn was executed when Elizabeth was only 2 years old, and her memory was politically dangerous for much of Elizabeth's early life. To carry her mother's likeness secretly, close to the skin, would have been a profoundly personal act, one that quietly defied the silences imposed by history and court politics. Some historians, however, suggest that one of the portraits may instead depict Catherine Parr, Henry VIII's sixth and final wife, who played a maternal role in Elizabeth's upbringing and supported her education. This alternative identification underscores the complexity of Elizabeth's personal attachments and reminds us that Tudor portrait miniatures, especially those lacking inscriptions, can rarely be identified with absolute certainty. Regardless of the precise sitters, the pairing of two female figures within a single ring clearly points to relationships of deep emotional importance rather than political display. The ring is believed to have been worn by Elizabeth I in her later years, a period marked by reflection, loss, and the weight of long rule. Its intimate scale contrasts sharply with the heavily symbolic public regalia she wore in portraits, suggesting that the Chequers ring belonged to a more private sphere of the Queen's life, one rarely glimpsed by her contemporaries and even less by history. Today, the Chequers ring forms part of the historic collection at Chequers, the official country residence of the British Prime Minister. Its presence there is unusual, as it is not part of the royal collection nor associated with modern royal ceremonial. Instead, it survives as a historic artifact, preserved for its cultural and emotional resonance rather than worn or displayed in state occasions. Contemporary royals do not use the ring, and it remains absent from modern jewelry rotations or public royal appearances. As a result, the Chequers ring occupies a unique position in British history. Not a crown jewel, not a ceremonial relic, but a deeply personal object that offers a rare, intimate glimpse into the inner life of one of England's most formidable monarchs. More than 4 centuries after it was made, it continues to fascinate historians precisely because it speaks softly of memory, loyalty, and identity, rather than loudly proclaiming power. Crown of Queen Adelaide. The Crown of Queen Adelaide is one of the most overlooked yet historically revealing pieces of British royal regalia, a crown that technically survives, yet has remained functionally dormant since the very moment it was created. Commissioned in 1831 for Queen Adelaide of Saxe-Meiningen, wife of King William IV, the crown was designed specifically for her role as queen consort at her husband's coronation. Unlike the ancient crowns reused and reworked across centuries, Adelaide's crown was created for a single, highly specific purpose and would fulfill that purpose only once. Queen Adelaide's coronation came at a transitional moment in British monarchy. William IV ascended the throne late in life, and the couple ruled for a comparatively short period. Adelaide herself was known for her modesty, deep religious conviction, and resistance to excessive royal display. These qualities were subtly reflected in the design of her crown. While still unmistakably regal, it was lighter, less ostentatious, and more restrained than earlier consort crowns. The structure followed traditional crown form, with arches and a mond and cross, but relied heavily on hired and removable jewels, a common practice in the 18th and early 19th centuries. At the coronation ceremony in Westminster Abbey, Queen Adelaide wore the crown only briefly, fulfilling its ceremonial role before it was dismantled in a very literal sense. Immediately afterward, all of the gemstones were removed, leaving behind what is essentially a jewel-less framework. This was not unusual at the time. Royal jewels were often reused, redistributed, or returned to lenders, but it sealed the crown's fate as an object without future function. Once stripped of its gems, the crown was placed into storage in the royal vaults, effectively ending its active life. Unlike earlier crowns that were repeatedly altered for new queens, Adelaide's crown was never adapted for later consorts. By the time Queen Victoria ascended the throne just 6 years later, tastes, symbolism, and ceremonial traditions had shifted, and new crowns were commissioned instead. Adelaide's crown, already emptied of jewels and tied to a now-closed chapter of monarchy, remained untouched. In later years, the crown was formally reacquired into the royal collection, preserved not as a living piece of regalia, but as a historical artifact. Today, it is occasionally displayed, allowing the public to view its structure and craftsmanship. Yet it is never worn, never modified, and never used in modern coronations or state ceremonies. Later queens consort, from Alexandra to Mary, Elizabeth, and Camilla, have all worn entirely different crowns, leaving Adelaide's creation permanently sidelined. This makes the crown of Queen Adelaide a rare category of royal object, extant but forgotten. It still exists, intact in form, yet disconnected from the ceremonial life of the monarchy. It holds no active symbolic role, no contemporary function, and no prospect of revival. Instead, it stands as a snapshot of a single coronation, a single queen, and a brief reign that quietly passed between more dominant royal eras. More than a relic, the crown is a reminder that not all royal regalia is destined for centuries of reuse. Some pieces, like Adelaide's crown, are created for one moment in history, and when that moment passes, they fade into silence, preserved not by tradition, but by memory alone. Crown of Queen Alexandra. The crown of Queen Alexandra occupies a distinctive yet often overlooked place in the history of British royal regalia, a crown that still exists in physical form, yet has quietly slipped out of ceremonial relevance. Commissioned in 1902 for Queen Alexandra of Denmark, the beloved consort of King Edward VII, the crown marked a deliberate stylistic and symbolic departure from earlier British consort crowns. Its creation reflected both Alexandra's personal tastes and the changing image of monarchy at the dawn of the 20th century. Unlike the heavier, more traditional crowns worn by earlier queens consort, Alexandra's crown embraced a European-inspired design, influenced by continental royal fashions with which she was deeply familiar. Most striking was its structure of 8 half-arches rather than the usual full arches. This open, lighter silhouette gave the crown an elegant, almost diadem-like appearance, softening the visual authority typically associated with royal crowns. The design aligned closely with Alexandra's public image, graceful, refined, and more approachable than the rigid grandeur of earlier royal consorts. At the heart of the crown's symbolism was the inclusion of the legendary Koh-i-Noor diamond, set prominently in the front cross. Already one of the most famous gemstones in the world, the Koh-i-Noor carried immense imperial weight, having been acquired by the British Crown following the annexation of the Punjab in the mid-19th century. Its placement in Alexandra's crown reinforced Britain's imperial power at the height of the Edwardian era, while also associating the Queen Consort with continuity, authority, and global dominion. Queen Alexandra wore the crown during the coronation ceremonies of 1902, a moment that signaled both a new reign and a new royal aesthetic. However, unlike earlier consort crowns that were reused and adapted, Alexandra's crown marked the beginning of a modern shift in royal tradition. Future queens consort did not inherit or reuse it. Instead, each was provided with her own bespoke crown. Queen Mary in 1911, Queen Elizabeth, later the Queen Mother, in 1937, and Queen Camilla more than a century later. This change effectively ended the practice of passing down a single consort crown from one generation to the next. As a result, the crown of Queen Alexandra quickly lost its ceremonial function. Though it remained part of the crown jewels, it was no longer needed for state occasions. Over time, its most valuable gemstones, including the Koh-i-Noor, were removed. For public display, these stones were replaced with paste replicas, a practical decision meant to preserve the originals while still presenting the crown's appearance to visitors. Today, the crown is housed in the Tower of London, where it remains on view as part of the historic collection. Yet its presence is largely passive. It is never worn, never altered, and never considered for modern ceremonial use. Stripped of its original gemstones and disconnected from living royal tradition, the crown exists in a kind of historical limbo, preserved but no longer alive in function. This status has rendered the crown of Queen Alexandra a forgotten crown, despite its survival. It is neither lost nor destroyed, yet it holds no active role in the monarchy's visual language. Instead, it stands as a relic of a specific moment in history, the Edwardian era, the height of empire, and the final period when consort crowns still carried overt imperial symbolism. In this way, the crown serves as a quiet testament to how royal traditions evolve. Though still physically intact, it has been overtaken by changing customs and modern sensibilities, an object once created to be worn at the center of power, now preserved as a silent witness to a monarchy that has moved on. Queen Elizabeth's unused tiaras. Despite having access to one of the most extraordinary jewel collections in the world, Queen Elizabeth II was famously selective about the tiaras she wore. Over her 7-decade reign, she relied heavily on a relatively small rotation of favored pieces, while a number of exquisite early 20th century tiaras remained rarely worn, quietly stored, or largely absent from public view for decades. These jewels technically survived within the royal collection, yet their long disappearances earned them reputations as forgotten tiaras. One of the most striking examples is the Strathmore Rose tiara, circa 1920s. This delicate piece was given in 1923 to Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, later the Queen Mother, as a wedding gift upon her marriage to the future King George VI. Crafted in diamonds shaped into 5 naturalistic Tudor roses, the tiara reflected the lighter, more romantic jewelry styles of the interwar period. Unlike the towering tiaras favored later in the century, the Strathmore Rose was low, flexible, and feminine, beautiful but less commanding in appearance. The Queen Mother appears to have worn the tiara only occasionally, and after the 1930s, it vanished almost entirely from public view. When Elizabeth II inherited it, she never wore it publicly, preferring sturdier and more recognizable tiaras that suited her role as reigning monarch. For decades, the Strathmore Rose tiara sat unseen in the vaults, known only through archival photographs and whispered references in royal inventories. By the early 21st century, royal watchers widely believed it was effectively retired. That perception changed dramatically in 2023, when Catherine, Princess of Wales, wore the Strathmore Rose tiara at a state banquet. The appearance marked the tiara's first confirmed public outing in nearly a century, instantly transforming it from a forgotten relic into one of the most talked-about royal jewels of the modern era. Its revival underscored how many historic tiaras still exist, waiting quietly for the right moment and wearer. Beyond the Strathmore Rose, several other tiaras associated with Elizabeth II spent long periods in obscurity. The lotus flower tiara, created in the 1920s from a necklace inherited by Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, was worn by Elizabeth II only sparingly in the early years of her reign. Though not entirely unused, it appeared so infrequently that it was largely absent from public consciousness for decades, later becoming more familiar through wear by Princess Margaret and, in modern times, Catherine. Similarly, the Plunket tiara, an Edwardian diamond piece dating to the early 1900s, was part of Elizabeth II's collection but saw extremely limited use. While it did appear briefly during her reign, it never entered regular rotation and remained one of the least seen tiaras in royal history. Its low profile and old-fashioned design likely contributed to its long periods of dormancy. Together, these tiaras illustrate an important truth about Elizabeth II's reign. Ownership did not guarantee visibility. Many jewels were preserved rather than promoted, protected rather than paraded. Practical considerations, personal taste, changing fashion, and the evolving image of the monarchy all played roles in sidelining these ornate survivals from an earlier era. Nizam of Hyderabad. Tiara. The Nizam of Hyderabad tiara occupies a unique and poignant place in the history of Queen Elizabeth II's jewel collection. A piece that once existed in full splendor, was photographed and recorded, yet no longer survives in a wearable form. Unlike crowns or tiaras that simply fell out of fashion and retreated into vaults, this tiara met a more decisive fate. By the early 1970s, it had been deliberately dismantled, marking the end of its life as a distinct royal ornament. The tiara originated from the extraordinary jewel gifts presented to Princess Elizabeth in 1947 by Mir Osman Ali Khan, the Nizam of Hyderabad, then one of the wealthiest individuals in the world. His wedding present was remarkable not only for its value, but for its flexibility. A platinum and diamond suite by Cartier that could be worn as a tiara, necklace, or separated into individual components. The tiara form featured elegant scrollwork and graduated diamond motifs typical of high Cartier craftsmanship from the early 20th century, combining opulence with refined balance. For Elizabeth, who would ascend the throne just 5 years later, the Nizam jewels represented both personal sentiment and diplomatic symbolism. They came from a princely ruler at the twilight of British imperial influence in India, capturing a final moment of regal exchange before global power structures shifted. While Elizabeth II owned an unparalleled collection of jewels, she wore the Nizam tiara only sparingly, if at all, favoring more structurally robust and visually iconic pieces suited to her public image as monarch. By the 1970s, the royal jewelry collection underwent a period of reassessment and reshaping. Changing tastes, practical considerations, and the desire to adapt older pieces for more versatile use led to the dismantling of certain jewels. In 1973, the Nizam of Hyderabad tiara was taken apart, its diamonds redistributed into other forms, most notably a necklace that remains recognizable today. This decision effectively erased the tiara as a standalone object, even though its materials continued to exist within the broader collection. What makes the Nizam tiara especially haunting is that photographs of the original piece survive. These images confirm its design, proportions, and craftsmanship, allowing historians and jewel experts to study a tiara that can no longer be worn or reconstructed with certainty. Unlike lost jewels destroyed by war or theft, this tiara was intentionally unmade, a conscious transformation rather than an accident of history. As a result, the Nizam of Hyderabad tiara exists today in a liminal state, historically extant yet physically absent. It is not displayed, not stored intact, and not available for revival by future generations. Its identity survives only through documentation, archival imagery, and written records that testify to its former existence. In the broader narrative of Queen Elizabeth II's reign, the tiara illustrates a lesser-known reality of royal jewel collections. Preservation does not always mean permanence. Some pieces are sacrificed to extend the life or usefulness of others, quietly disappearing while their components live on in new forms. The Nizam of Hyderabad tiara is therefore not merely forgotten. It is lost in practice, a ghost of royal splendor that once crowned history and now survives only in memory and record. Greville Emerald Kokoshnik Tiara. The Greville Emerald Kokoshnik Tiara is one of the most dramatic and valuable pieces of jewelry in the modern British royal collection. Yet for most of its existence, it remained hidden from public view. Created in 1919 and set with a breathtaking array of diamonds and vivid green emeralds, the tiara exemplifies the grand scale and opulence of early 20th century high jewelry. Despite its undeniable magnificence, it spent decades effectively dormant, earning a reputation as a spectacular heirloom that few ever saw worn. The tiara was part of the legendary jewelry collection of Dame Margaret Greville, a celebrated Edwardian society hostess whose wealth and influence allowed her to amass one of the greatest private jewel collections in Britain. Lacking close heirs, Greville made a fateful decision. Upon her death in 1942, she bequeathed the bulk of her jewels to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. This extraordinary inheritance dramatically expanded the royal vaults, introducing pieces of immense size, value, and continental flair, none more striking than the Emerald Kokoshnik. Designed in the Kokoshnik style, inspired by traditional Russian court headdresses, the tiara features a high, fan-shaped silhouette composed of closely set diamond bars, each crowned with large emeralds. The contrast between the icy brilliance of the diamonds and the saturated green of the emeralds creates a bold, almost theatrical effect. Unlike lighter tiaras intended for regular court wear, this piece was unmistakably formal and imposing, demanding both confidence and occasion. Despite inheriting it, the Queen Mother never wore the tiara publicly. Known for her preference for lighter, more familiar diamond pieces, she likely viewed the Emerald Kokoshnik as too heavy, too formal, or simply too extravagant for her personal style. As a result, the tiara spent much of the mid-20th century carefully stored in the royal vaults, known to historians but unseen by the public. Queen Elizabeth II inherited the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik tiara in 2002, but she too declined to bring it into regular rotation. Her tastes favored structured, instantly recognizable tiaras that photographed well and suited repeated state use. Once again, the Emerald Kokoshnik remained untouched. Its presence felt more in inventory lists than on royal heads. The tiara's long absence from public life finally ended in 2018, when Princess Eugenie chose it for her wedding to Jack Brooksbank. The appearance caused a sensation among royal watchers. For the first time, the public saw the full scale of the emeralds, the dramatic height of the Kokoshnik design, and the sheer audacity of a jewel that had waited nearly a century for its moment. The choice instantly elevated the tiara from obscurity to modern legend. Since that historic debut, the tiara has remained extremely rarely worn. As of 2025, it has appeared publicly only twice, once on Princess Eugenie and once on Queen Camilla, who wore it for a formal state occasion. Even now, it remains far from a staple piece, reserved for only the most significant events and the few wearers able to carry its visual weight. Today, the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik tiara occupies a unique status within the royal collection. It is not forgotten, yet it is not fully integrated into modern royal tradition. Instead, it stands as a reminder of the immense depth of the crown's jewel holdings, proof that some of the most extraordinary treasures can spend generations in silence, waiting for the rare moment when history allows them to shine again. Oriental Circlet Tiara. The Oriental Circlet. Tiara is among the most historically resonant yet quietly sidelined jewels in the British royal collection, a piece commissioned with dynastic intent, bound by royal instruction, and left dormant for decades, despite its striking presence. Created in 1853 for Queen Victoria, the tiara was designed by Prince Albert, whose deep interest in symbolism, history, and design shaped many of the couple's most important commissions. From its inception, the jewel was never meant to be merely decorative. It was conceived as a visual statement about monarchy, continuity, and authority. Originally, the tiara was set with opals, gemstones then associated with good fortune and rarity. However, Victoria later ordered the opals replaced with rubies, stones traditionally linked to power, protection, and sovereignty. This alteration significantly changed the tiara's character, giving it a bolder and more authoritative presence. The design itself is unmistakable, a circlet formed of alternating crosses and fleur-de-lis, motifs drawn directly from medieval and heraldic imagery. Unlike lighter tiaras meant for court presentation, the Oriental Circlet reads almost as a crown, low, solid, and commanding. Queen Victoria attached exceptional importance to this piece. She formally stipulated that the Oriental Circlet tiara was to be reserved exclusively for queens and future queens, a restriction that set it apart from most other tiaras in the collection. This condition limited its wear dramatically, excluding princesses and secondary royal figures, and ensuring that the tiara would appear only on those at the very pinnacle of royal hierarchy. As a result, opportunities to wear it were always rare. The tiara found one of its most devoted admirers in Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, who favored it for its historic gravity and symbolic resonance. She wore it on several important occasions, appreciating its blend of tradition and authority. Yet even under her ownership, the tiara remained a special occasion piece rather than a regular fixture of royal jewelry rotations. When Queen Elizabeth II inherited the Oriental Circlet, its usage diminished further. Despite her respect for royal history, Elizabeth II wore the tiara only once publicly, in 2005, choosing instead to rely on more familiar and structurally adaptable pieces throughout her reign. With no reigning queen consort for much of her later years and few occasions fitting the tiara's strict criteria, the jewel slipped quietly back into the vault. For decades, the Oriental Circlet tiara existed more as a footnote in royal inventories than as a living piece of regalia. Royal watchers knew of its existence, yet years passed without a single public appearance. By the early 21st century, it was widely regarded as effectively retired, an artifact admired for its history rather than anticipated for future wear. That perception changed only very recently, in 2025, when Catherine, Princess of Wales, wore the Oriental Circlet tiara at a German state banquet. The appearance marked the first significant revival of the tiara in decades and underscored its original purpose: to be worn by a future queen. Its reemergence served as a powerful reminder of how deeply layered the royal jewel collection truly is, and how many historic pieces lie in long dormancy, awaiting a moment that aligns with both protocol and symbolism. Brazilian Aquamarine Tiara. The Brazilian aquamarine tiara stands as one of the most visually arresting yet quietly elusive jewels in Queen Elizabeth II's personal collection, a masterpiece created not for ancient tradition, but for modern diplomacy and personal expression. Designed around 1957 by the royal jewelers Gerard, the tiara was commissioned specifically to complement a magnificent aquamarine and diamond suite that Elizabeth had received just a few years earlier on the occasion of her marriage. The origins of the set trace back to 1953, when the people of Brazil presented the young queen with an extraordinary wedding gift, a parure of aquamarines and diamonds of exceptional clarity and size. Aquamarines, prized for their luminous sea blue hue, were an inspired choice for a modern monarch emerging in the post-war world. Rather than relying solely on inherited diamonds, the gift symbolized warmth, goodwill, and the renewal of international relationships within the Commonwealth and beyond. Initially, the Brazilian gift included a necklace and earrings, both designed in a refined mid-20th century style that emphasized clean lines and generous stones rather than heavy ornamentation. Elizabeth wore the set with enough frequency that it soon became clear a matching tiara would complete the ensemble. Gerard answered with a design that echoed the necklace's structure: large rectangular and square-cut aquamarines, framed by delicate diamond settings that allowed light to flood the stones. The resulting tiara was notable for its airiness and elegance. Unlike towering Kokoshniks or rigid circlets, the Brazilian aquamarine tiara featured a flowing, almost architectural rhythm, balancing size with restraint. The pale blue aquamarines gave the piece a cool, contemporary feel, setting it apart from the ruby and emerald-heavy tiaras traditionally associated with monarchy. In photographs, the tiara appeared luminous rather than imposing, a subtle but powerful visual statement. Despite its beauty, Elizabeth II wore the tiara only occasionally throughout her reign. It appeared primarily at state banquets, diplomatic receptions, and formal evening events, where its modern aesthetic suited international audiences and less ceremonial settings. Unlike her most familiar diamond tiaras, which became visual signatures, the aquamarine piece remained a specialist jewel, reserved for specific contexts rather than regular rotation. By the 2000s, public appearances of the tiara had grown increasingly rare. Its last confirmed outings occurred during state functions and diplomatic events in that decade, after which it quietly disappeared from view. As Elizabeth II reduced her evening engagements in later years, the tiara returned to the vaults, joining a select group of royal jewels admired more in archives than in modern photography. Today, the Brazilian aquamarine tiara remains intact within the royal collection, yet it has not been publicly worn for many years. Unlike tiaras that have been dismantled or permanently retired, this one simply waits, preserved, complete, and potentially ready for future revival. Its absence has only enhanced its mystique, elevating it to near-legendary status among royal jewel historians. Teck Crescent Tiara. The Teck Crescent tiara is one of the most intriguing survivals from the 19th century, a jewel whose elegant design and adaptable construction once placed it among the most versatile pieces of royal headwear, yet which has since slipped quietly into obscurity. Though it remains part of the royal collection today, the tiara has not enjoyed meaningful public use in the modern era, earning its place among Britain's forgotten royal heirlooms. The tiara's origins trace back to Princess Mary Adelaide of Cambridge, a prominent and influential figure within the Victorian royal family. Known for her strong personality and love of jewelry, Mary Adelaide amassed a notable collection of diamonds, including this distinctive crescent-shaped piece. Created in the mid-1800s, the tiara reflects Victorian tastes for celestial and symbolic motifs. The crescent form, long associated with femininity, renewal, and status, was a popular decorative theme in 19th-century aristocratic jewelry. Constructed from bands of diamonds arranged in a sweeping arc, the Teck Crescent tiara was remarkable for its modular design. It could be worn in multiple configurations, with or without additional base rows of diamonds, allowing it to appear either as a delicate diadem or as a more imposing statement piece. This flexibility made it suitable for a range of occasions, from formal court functions to grand evening events. Upon Mary Adelaide's death, the tiara passed to her only daughter, Queen Mary, one of the most influential figures in shaping the modern royal jewel collection. Queen Mary was a passionate collector and restorer of historic jewels, often redesigning or repurposing inherited pieces to suit contemporary tastes. While she valued the Teck Crescent tiara, it never became one of her signature pieces, likely overshadowed by the grander tiaras she commissioned or transformed during her lifetime. The tiara was later inherited by Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, who appreciated jewels with strong historical lineage. During her era, the Teck Crescent tiara remained part of the collection, but it was not prominently worn. By the mid-20th century, changing fashion favored more symmetrical and vertically structured tiaras, leaving crescent forms looking increasingly old-fashioned. As a result, the tiara's appearances grew infrequent. After the Queen Mother's death in 2002, the Teck Crescent tiara effectively retreated into storage. Unlike some inherited jewels that were revived or adapted for newer generations, this piece remained untouched. It has not been worn publicly by Queen Elizabeth II, nor has it appeared on any senior royal in recent decades. Its absence from modern ceremonial life has rendered it nearly invisible to the public, known primarily through historical records and early photographs. Despite its long dormancy, the Teck Crescent tiara still survives intact within the royal collection. Its diamonds, craftsmanship, and distinctive silhouette remain preserved, even if its role has shifted from living regalia to historical artifact. In this sense, it embodies a recurring pattern in royal jewelry history. Pieces that were once adaptable and admired can fade from use as tastes, traditions, and visual priorities evolve. What do you think about Britain's forgotten royal jewels? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.